Happy afternoon, everyone.
Hello from Atlanta.
And happy Nurses Week to those of you who are watching
Yes.
and celebrating that particular week, as we all are. So yes, as Sue mentioned, we are in sunny, hot Atlanta, Georgia. And quite obviously in a hotel room. Let's just call it out. 28th story of the Marriott Marquis.
And what is there, like 47 stories?
47 stories. We thought we were frightened, but
we are not in rural anymore.
We are not in rural anymore. So today we're going to talk about, we decided to take a cut out of the talk that we're giving today to our audience at the National Rural Health Association. And so we're going to be talking about a robust goal cycle.
Let us know if you're here, by the way. Yeah, who's here? That's here. All right.
Oh, yes. Good job.
I can't see. We're just talking about I can't see.
Our international audience with her sister
Susan
is here. So, but what we'd like to open with a quote from Calvin Coolidge. And what our president, Calvin Coolidge, had to say to us is that if we trust to chance, we must abide by the results of chance. And in healthcare, we cannot leave any results to chance. The work that we do is too important. We're caring for our communities. We're really responsible for the care of those communities. And so we can't leave our results to chance. But meanwhile, you're, hoping that things are getting better year by year, and hope is not a strategy.
Yeah, you gotta figure out how to control it.
That's right. So when we talk about, really making your strategy, your vision, even goals alive for everyone that works for you, you have to set this vision and then lead them to it by involving them. Right? We do things with people, not to them.
Absolutely.
But also give them a measurement to know whether or not they're winning, because people want to work for a winning organization. People want to work in a department that they know is successful in keeping track. So, but meanwhile, you're going to be asking them, how do I tell people that they have to change their behaviors? How do I get physicians, other leaders, and employees to change behaviors? And really, behavior change can be the side effect, or the ripple effect, you will, of a great goal really well set. So today, in honor of Hospital Week, in honor of rural healthcare, where both of our roots are, Sue's going to tell a great story of a goal that was very well set, that changed the behaviors and culture of an organization, and also taught a very valuable lesson to an entire hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. We call this the Heather story. Some of you have heard some of our other stories, the Bob and Robert story and whatever. So we give our little stories a name. And these lessons are really profound in these stories. And the Heather story is about a housekeeping department. And so in the organization where Jane and I led, we had the opportunity to, create and use a really great goal cycle. And this is one of the tactics that we teach in our partner organizations. We can take about 80% of our framework and attach it in some way to this cadence of a goal cycle, so to improve. And so there's a lot of work that we do with our partners around this. So the Heather story kind of shows the end result in a small story about how behavior can be changed through a goal. So Heather was the new leader. She'd never set goals before. And so I was her boss, the vice president at the time, and she needed my help with that. And certainly my job was to help and support her in that. So what she planned to do, and what we recommend other leaders do, is you do this with your team, your employees. So she gathered all her housekeepers together to set goals. And in preparation for that, she was prepared in this way. She was prepared to tell them about what the organization's goals are, so that they were as familiar with the goals as she was for the entire organization, because the tactic is that individual departments make contribution to the organization's goals, so their goals are created in alignment. So she needed to share that piece of information. So she got ready to share the goals with her housekeeping team. And then she also was prepared to share with them almost like a State of the Union address where she was sharing data. So she was sharing data about their specific budget and finances and how they were performing, what their expenses look like for the year, etc. Patient satisfaction related to inpatient, outpatient cleanliness, things related to their employee engagement results, etc. So she was prepared to share this information about their current results and the trends of results. So then after she shared those two things, she really just went into asking an open-ended question. So, hey team, how do you think we can contribute the most in the next year? So if we're setting 2 or 3 goals for how we can get better, and that's in alignment with what the organization wants to accomplish, what would be those 2 or 3 things? Well, in that moment, a girl in the back of the room, a lady there who I knew was illiterate, couldn't read or write, she raised her hand. And she said, I think we should have a goal to decrease absenteeism. And at this point, we had shared no data or information about absenteeism. We had shared information about lots of things, but not absenteeism. So we asked, why do you think the department should have a goal related to absenteeism? And the answer was brilliant. The answer was brilliant. She said, well, you showed us that our overtime is high and it's going up and up and up. And the reason that it is because, you know, when people call off their shifts and we have to call somebody in to replace them, it's usually at overtime. You showed us that our turnover rate is very high, higher than most of the departments in the hospital. And you also showed us that our teamwork score on the employee engagement score is one of the worst in the hospital. And it doesn't feel much like a team. And you don't want to stay working for a team where people don't show up to work and you're left short. And she said, and our cleanliness scores are very low, in the bottom 25% of the country for both inpatient and outpatient. And if people don't show up to work, they can't clean the building. And we're like, brilliant. This is absolutely brilliant, right? This idea of decreasing absenteeism. So that did become one of their goals. And what they found out was they had to, you know, figure out how bad the problem was. And they found out in the last year, 246 people had called off their shift. And so they set a goal. It was, yeah. Sometimes it was up to 30 times in a pay period. Yeah. Like they had 30 times in a pay period. So then what they did was they set their goal, and what they set it for was they wanted to get below 150 in the next year. Now, if I was, you know, just like throwing out an idea for a goal for that, I would have maybe set, a 25% reduction would be, a tremendous reduction, but they set it at 150, which is about 40% reduction. And that, part of that is, aim high and miss versus shoot low and hit. But also when goals are set on the higher end of difficulty, which they intuitively did, then people have to be all in. Mm-hmm. The whole team has to be all in to make that happen. So that's part of the behavior change in this story is they set a goal that was pretty tough. Mm-hmm. And they would have to be all in and all work to change their behavior to make it happen. So they set the goal, and then the first thing they did was set the action plan. What's the first things you can do? What's the first steps you can take to start getting to 150? And they only started with 2 things. Mm-hmm. They were going to keep a graph and keep it very transparent right on their door of their department that showed every pay period how many absences there was. And they went back a whole year and trended that. That's how they knew there was 246. That's how they knew they had some weeks or payrolls with 30 absences. So they wanted to track that and be very mindful of when people are not present for work. Then what they wanted to do is celebrate those people that did show up, which was fabulous. What a great idea. So they created a perfect attendance kind of board that every 2 weeks, every payroll, if you did not call off your shift at all and you worked all your scheduled shift, your name went up on an perfect attendance board for recognition. And then your name also went into a drawing once a quarter at their staff meeting for a $50 Visa card, right? So the perfect attendance recognition started, the transparency about how often. Oh, and then one of the ladies went and bought one of those dollar store banners that looks like a thermometer, and marked a line on it 150. And every time somebody, called off their shift, there'd be another line, and they were keeping track that way too. It was really simple. So that's all they started with, and they started to see a decrease in absenteeism. Then after that, what happened as well is in the next quarter, they said, we just need to bump this up another notch. What else can we add to our action plan? and they did peer panel behavior-based interviews. So how wise, they decided to change the questions, many of the questions on their behavior-based interview, and ask questions about things related to dependability and showing up for work. So they aligned their behavior-based interviews with the goals they wanted to achieve and the behaviors they wanted to change. And so, and again, because they were having high turnover, they were hiring a lot. So let's hire right to people that'll help us with our goals instead of make the problem worse. So now they're 6 months into the year and they're trending to meet their goal. Absenteeism is going down with just 3, they set the goal. And I think that had a lot to do with it. If Heather would have just came in and said, hey guys, we have an absenteeism problem, we're gonna, reduce that by 25% next year, this story probably would not have ended like it was.
No.
But because it was a social contract basically with this team, they created the goal, they identified it, it led to a different outcome. So 6 months through the year, they're trending to meet their goal. Every month, I'm checking in with Heather at our monthly accountability meetings, making sure their action plan is working. They're trending towards a goal, and they are until June hits. So June hits, July, and it's summer in Sault Ste. Marie, which means that people would be rather outside, enjoying the great outdoors than working inside, cleaning a hospital. And so they started to see absenteeism start to tick back up as summer months approached. And so we were talking about this at a monthly accountability meeting. And I said, Heather, what about maybe using a tactic of a challenge? So she created a challenge that they had never had a pay period where everyone had perfect attendance. So she set a challenge out, and she said that if everyone, for that very first payroll that summer where everyone had perfect attendance, she would give them all a $5 Dairy Queen certificate. Because in Sault Ste. Marie, that's also a sign that it's summer, is Dairy Queen's only open for a few months and the lines are long. And so so she set the challenge out there of a mini goal of, can we get a perfect attendance payroll period? The very next one, for the first time ever, they had a perfect attendance month or payroll. So at their staff meeting, they passed out the Dairy Queen certificates. And, one of the interesting things about that is I ponder if anyone ever bought ice cream with those certificates, because the behavior that we saw was this. One of the housekeepers was down in the ER, and I was down there rounding with some staff down there, and I saw the housekeeper down there pull out her Dairy Queen certificate out of her pocket, and she showed it to the staff working in the ER that day. And she said, look what we got. We got this gift certificate because we had a perfect attendance pay period, and we've never done that before. We have a goal for decreasing absenteeism, and we're nailing it. And we are going to meet our goal. And we had our first perfect attendance. And she was just so beaming with pride, right? So you could see that it was top of mind, very proudful about the work of their team, the collective effort of their team. So then fast forward almost to the end of the year, the very last payroll is, as many of you know, it includes Christmas and the New Year's holiday. Holidays can be tough for attendance, and it had been for them in the prior year. They knew that, and going into that last 2 weeks, they were at 146. So they knew they were close to meeting their goal. And 2 things happened in that last payroll that were pretty profound that show how behavior changed in this team. One, I was up on the floor rounding on the night shift with patients, and it was on one of the big med-surg units, and down the hall was Bob, the floor finisher, and he was, doing the floors at night, and he yells down the hallway to me, and he's like, Sue, come here. Did you see that we're going to meet our goal? Do you think we're going to meet our goal? I mean, I know it's the last pay period and it might be tough, but we're at 146. And I'm like, yeah, Bob, I really think you're going to meet your goal. I said, but let's, take down our voices a little bit, because on this floor, their goal is quiet. So we giggled a little bit. But anyway, it was so top of mind, right? He was so excited about his team. And so, it just showed the behavior change and the all-in that it took. But then also what happened that pay period was one of the employees was really sick. And one of the things that they had conversations about related to this goal is, when you're the housekeeping team, your chief infection officers, right? You are preventing infection, not creating it. So if you are sick, you can't show up to work just because we have an absenteeism goal so that you're spreading germs when you're supposed to be cleaning germs. So this employee was really sick and she knew she could not show up for work, yet she didn't want to let her team down. So she called, you know, all of her teammates one by one, because there was, you know, this process that if you did a shift change, that if I work somebody else's shift, they work mine. There's no absenteeism because they were both worked. There's no overtime, none of that. We just swap. So she looked for somebody on her team that she could swap with. And the only person she could swap with was somebody who was working Christmas. So she was scheduled off for Christmas that year. Her teammate was supposed to work Christmas, but she agreed to work Christmas to not let her team down by calling in sick. And I think that's just such an example of individual and collective behavior change when people will behave in that way. And then if you think about it for Heather, oh, and by the way, they met their goal. They had perfect attendance that last 2 weeks. And so that perfect attendance and meeting that goal did exactly what they knew was going to happen. Like that beginning conversation about what was going to happen to patient satisfaction, overtime turnover, and the like, is that those things exactly is what happened. Patient satisfaction with outpatient, inpatient cleanliness went up, turnover went down, their teamwork score and employee engagement score improved, overtime went down. Oh, and the infection rate in the entire building was cut in half, and they took credit for it. And, you know, so really one goal, actually when we looked at it, one goal improved 7 key metrics that were all in alignment with the organization's key strategies, right? So one goal. Now take this one goal of 3 for this department and let's multiply that by 30 or 40 departments in an organization. So can you imagine the collective effort and the aligned effort and the amount of progress an organization can make in 1 year when you use a process like this, right? I mean, like, I think this story, just multiply it by 30 times
or even
3.
10.
I mean, you know, it's just tremendous. And then on top of that, add the efforts of the teams. This is how we team around here, so that you have the parallel efforts of the teams that are working on the organization-wide solutions. Then you have each department working on their unique contributions, and collectively, you've got 2 amazing engines fired up to meet your goals.
Well, I just love to see pride. I love to see pride in people and, you know, their purpose given to them. I loved seeing nurses and physicians saying, hey, I heard what you guys did. Great job. Wow. Right? And they just brought us to our knees that year. They really did. The housekeeping department.
Yeah. Right? And then, you know, what was exciting about this same goal is they thought that still wasn't good enough. They set the goal for the next year to make it even better. They got to 74. All those results, you know, overtime went down even further, patient satisfaction went up even further, their turnover went down even further, you know, like all those results that this rippled into just kept getting better when they kept working on this. And then the infection rate went in half again and made it one of the lowest in the state. Maybe it was the lowest in the state at that point now, because it went down again. So the idea is that behavior change was really, they changed the culture of their department related to showing up for work, and that had a positive ripple effect. And behavior change is the hardest of all. Absolutely the hardest of all. And their goal cycle created that for them. And then the next year, they didn't even set a goal for this. They moved on to other things, but it kept going down and down and down. Every year after that, the absenteeism just kept getting less and less because they had just changed it. They had nailed it. So I just love this, which we call the Heather story. I just love the Heather story, and I just think it embodies just exactly what we want to see happen in all of our, you know, partner organizations related to how individual departments and employees come together to just nail a goal.
Yep. Do it
Just
with
nail-
them, not to,
just
not to
nail a
them.
goal.
So our call to action for you today is that maybe it's the middle of your goal cycle. Maybe you set some goals, but aren't working to action plan and achieve your goals.
And many of
It's
our
never
partners
too late.
actually right now are getting ready for their next goal cycle. A lot of our partners, it seems, have a July 1 goal, a fiscal year and goal cycle year. So like we're doing a lot of readiness right now of goals, setting, and with the teams as well as the, so we're doing a lot of that right now.
The point being, it's never too late to start.
Yeah.
Just start.
Yeah.